everyone. Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Hello, Rush Nation, and welcome along to the Flagship show here. Thanks for joining us again. Sadly, no Murph today. He got called into the big smoke of London town, so I'm sure he's probably sat on a train watching this as we speak. But I'm Dan. I'll guide you through it. I am pleased to introduce to you guys. You can see him sat there, writer and ranker for Dynasty Nerds, host of the Dynasty Debates podcast, and joined from Belfast and Ireland by Evan Brown. How are you, Evan?
I am fantastic, mate. Thanks for the invite. Glad to be here. Love the intro. A bit of Scott Hansen action. Never go wrong there.
Yeah, right. It's awesome. And they've just done the video in my name now. I've only been doing the show for 8-9 months. Finally got my name on the credits. So.
There you go. You're moving up in the big time.
I am, right. Murph and Rob sat down last week and come up with that. So that's awesome. I said to Murph last week, I'm not in somebody else's chair at the minute. So feels so good.
Shout out Murph.
Yeah, right. So how are you, Evan? Tell people that don't know you, who you are, what you do. I mentioned a little bit there in the intro, but
yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed it, man. Like
good.
Over here in Belfast, holding it down. Yeah, over here in Belfast, holding it down, Northern Ireland style. Writing and ranking over at Dynasty Nerds and putting up episodes of my own podcast, Dynasty Debates. Pretty much have episodes up every single week. Some awesome guests on there. We've had Rich from Dynasty Nerds recently. We've had Rich Cooling. I'm sure you guys all know Dynasty Island. And then just some awesome guests every single week. We had I've just dropped an episode today with Jeff Greenwood from the Fantasy Footballers, co-host of the Tackle Dummies pod. So yeah, a lot of great guests. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, definitely. I'd thoroughly recommend it. I was listening. So we sat down and had a look at what we want to do today. Me and Murph obviously been through a bit of redraft stuff. We did the rookie stuff shortly after the draft, and I had Ali on and we looked at kind of the winners and losers from the draft. Me and Murph recently have been through some kind of draft strategy ideas over the last week or so, and ways that you can set out in a draft and things we look for and to try and take advantage of. And we thought we'd try and culminate the two here. So we thought we'd have a look at kind of rookies in this year's redraft. So which ones are we expecting? We've seen obviously in recent years Jefferson and Jamar Chase have huge impacts. So we thought if you're tackling a redraft league coming up soon, or might be one of these big competitions, which of these rookies from this year can we realistically expect a performance from that's going to aid your roster? Which ones have got the upside shots, and also look at their ADP and see which ones are a proper gamble at that slot. So I thought we'd do is just have a run through position by position and just kind of see what your thoughts are, Evan. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, I love it, man. Always up for talking rookies. Always.
Good. I got the right man on the show then. So we'll start at QB. I mean, first QB off the board this year, Kenny Pickett went to the Steelers. I guess for me, he's probably the only one that looks like being a starter. Do you agree with that?
So I mean, if we're talking redraft wise, yeah. I mean, if you're talking like your traditional sort of 1 QB redraft league, he's certainly the only one that I would even consider, taking a shot on. And to be honest with you, I probably wouldn't. Like if it's a 1 QB, if it's a super flex, I don't know how common super flex, is for redraft players now. I know that in Dynasty, it's all the rage and we kind of always play super flex. But if you're doing your traditional 1 QB sort of league, honestly, I'm probably not even taking a shot on Pickett, because it wouldn't surprise me if they at least give Trubisky, sort of an option to try and play, because they've paid him, they've brought him in. I think that, if it's pretty close in camp, or if Pickett is obviously looking better, they'll let Pickett just start the season. But if he's showing any signs of, rookie, getting used to the ropes and things like that, I just think they're a really good coaching staff. So it wouldn't surprise me if they give Trubisky, the first crack at the whip there and just let him start. So I wouldn't mess around with it. I would just keep an eye on him if I was doing redraft. I
think for me, he's the only one that would be feasible. I think he's the one most likely to start week 1. There's upside. There's decent receiver core, and they've got Harris in the run game there. So I think if any of them could be fantasy relevant from week 1, he's got the roster around him to try and be so. But as you say, if you're playing in a 1 QB redraft.
Yeah, exactly. I think, if I'm waiting,
14 teamers and that, you
yeah,
don't need
exactly.
it.
If I'm
You don't need the
waiting,
risk.
if you're waiting on QB, if it's only a one QB redraft, there's still going to be, in my opinion, better options. I don't think, unfortunately, doesn't look like QB is going to be one of those, one of the positions that we're really going to be like attacking for that redraft this year for rookies. Because if I'm waiting that late, I'm probably hoping I would rather just take a shot on Davis Mills or someone like that you can probably get really late in a draft who has already shown you something, and you're hoping that they will be able to do good, because even if he does the week one starter, he's not really that mobile of a quarterback. He's not really, got that Konami code that we really want for our quarterbacks. So unfortunately, we don't know how high his ceiling would actually be, even if he was the week one starter. So for me, in a 1 QB league, I'm probably not going for any of these guys. I might keep an eye on Pickett or keep an eye on Ritter, especially because he does have those rushing upside that we would want. But yeah, I wouldn't be going in banking on starting one of them guys.
And I think that's reflected. ADP currently got Kenny Pickett round 17 pick at 213, where, as you say, late draft pickup, Ryan Tannehill's available, mid 15th. You know what you're going to get. Okay, his receiver core's changed, but you know what you're going to get. He has a rushing touchdown in him, which assists that, I guess, to some extent. Even behind him, you've got Mac Jones and Jared Goff. Not a fancy, pretty name, but if you've waited that long on it, it's viable, right? So,
no, I mean 100%. I think even with Tannehill, I mean he still finishes like QB 13 last year or something like that. Everyone acts like he's dead and buried, but it may not be pretty, but he'll still put up some points for you. So if you're going to wait on QBs, I don't think you want to look at the rookies this year. At least not at the start of the season. Maybe just keep an eye on them.
Fair. They only did mention with the Russian upside was Desmond Ridder to come on to him. If he gets to roll, early enough in the season. I guess you're probably not going to draft him unless it's kind of a fixed best ball roster, but it could be someone you look to waive somewhere if you've lost a thing and he gets the job early.
Yeah, no, 100%. He's somebody that I'm really, I've definitely been trying to get in my dynasty rookie drafts, but certainly in redraft, I wouldn't draft him, but I would keep a really close eye on it, because if, I think there's sort of multiple different scenarios in which we could see Ritter take the field pretty early on. If Mariota struggles at all, then why not just see what you've got in the young guy? Even if it's just not necessarily Mariota's fault, but the Falcons are struggling, 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, they've only won 1 or 2 games. Again, why not just see what the young guys got? Because we know it's such a strong quarterback class in 23. You might as well assess what you've got there just in case there's any hope. So I think there's a lot of reality, a lot of realistic ways in which we see Ritter take the field. And if he does take the field, I know there's been some concerns about his accuracy. He's got freaking Kyle Pitts and Drake London that he can just chuck the ball up to, and he has those wheels. He's quite mobile. He's very athletic. He's definitely somebody that, could be a sneaky value in redraft if he gets that chance. So I would be very much keen to keep an eye on that situation.
Again, 1 QB redraft is probably not draftable. Maybe worth keeping an eye on a waiver wire some weeks in if he's going to get that starting role. If it was a super flex one and you're looking at Ritter, do you have to pair him with Mariota just so that you have that coverage?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those situations where unless you've just completely been like, I'm waiting at QB and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. Yeah, Ritter, exactly. Right? You can, if you've got, it depends on the redraft league, but if you're a traditional 1 QB, don't think you need to draft either of them. But if it is a super flex, it might not be a bad idea, because Mariota and Ritter are so late in drafts. You can really stack your roster, get your running backs, get your wide receivers, your tight end. And then kind of, if you've only taken one stud QB, or, you've taken a stud and then you've waited till maybe the 8th, 9th, 10th round and taken a car or something like that, then you can swoop in at the end there and get a Mariota and last couple picks. You can almost like take them with your last couple picks. That might be an option as well, because again, you never know. I mean, it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world to see Mariota have a couple of good games at the start of the season. He looked all right when he came in relief of Derek Carr, had a couple of good games. It's just whether he'll be able to, consistently sustain that throughout the course of the season.
I have took him in a bit where I've done a fixed best ball, so where there is no waivers, where I'm taking a stud QB early, and then late in drafts, I'm picking up both Mariota and Ritter almost in back-to-back rounds, effectively. Purely on the basis I've only got to have one of them for 1 week. And I don't know which one it will be, but both of them have a kind of upside. The games the game plan should suit a decent QB scoring. They should be behind in games. They should be throwing a lot. Ritter has a rush, and depending on whether I picked up an Allen or a Mahomes or a Jackson, let's say where their bye week is, I'm getting both just to kind of cover myself because there are no waivers in certain sort of best ball setups that whichever one it will be there.
Yeah.
It's 1 week. It's 1 week.
And especially, I think if you're playing best ball or, if it's just redraft, again, we're not worried about the future. We don't care what 2023 or 2025 looks like. Nope. I love that idea of going Herbert or Mahomes or something really early, stacking up all this quality in the middle, and then at the end grabbing like a Danny Dimes, a Mariota, a couple of these guys who have a rushing floor and have a potential, if it's the right week or given the right set of circumstances, they could have a big week. Or Davis Mills, like I've already mentioned, somebody you can get in the 12th, 14th, 15th rounds. I love that idea, because yes, it's great to have 2 stud quarterbacks, especially if it's dynasty, because we're thinking more long-term. But if you're only worried about this year, then like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if, Danny Dimes is a decent option, just because of his rushing floor and stuff like that.
In a 1 QB redraft league, if you take a stud, and me and Murphy said even you don't need one of them top 5, even if you pick up a Brady in the 7th to 9th, something like that, you only need one guy for 1 week. It is just, and the upside of those, you're going to have to get lucky to hit on one, but there'll be enough on the waivers that you can find something in form. There'll be injuries somewhere. So,
oh yeah, 100%. And that's what, you're exactly right. I think if you're playing your traditional, especially if it's like a office league or you know what I mean? Like if it's like a home league or something, I don't think we're going to even talk about these rookie quarterbacks for redraft. I think you're absolutely right. You can get a Brady, you can get a, crazy as it sounds, you can still, you can get Kirk Cousins in the double-digit rounds, and streaming quarterbacks in a 1 QB redraft league is pretty easy. Like it is fairly, because nobody, unless they're a complete sort of noob to fantasy, is going to be carrying more than 1 quarterback probably, at least at the start of the season. So you've got that kind of insulation of like, you can kind of see how things shake out. Wouldn't surprise me in some leagues if you're going to see somebody like a 2 or something, he's still on waivers even after the draft, so
you will 12, 14 team. At most you're going to have, let's say 20 of the 14 team, 20 QBs gone if there's a 14 team, and let's say some will pick up 2.
Exactly.
You're still going to have 12 options on board. So one of those is going to give you a QB2 number for 1 week, and I'm sure that can suffice for what you need it for. So
yeah, exactly. It's not something that you need to, and that's the whole thing, isn't it? About even JJ Zacharyson and those kind of guys have built their whole, empire on the back of like late round QB. So in redraft, 1 QB, definitely don't worry about. I wouldn't worry at all about the rookies. I would wait and want to see what they're doing anyways, because you can grab a Brady or any of these guys and probably 6th, 7th, 8th round, or even if you want to wait even later, you can get a Derek Carr probably in like the 12th round or something, and you can stack him with Adams, which is great because Adams is still going to get 140 targets, 150 targets. It's still going to be a nice stack, and you don't have to spend up to get it.
That's it. The only other QB I wanted to touch upon, and again, fantasy relevance, I don't think is there, especially in redraft, but I looked at the ADP data, and Matt Corral. Matt Corral's ADP at the minute is a round ahead of both Darnold and Baker. Are we expecting Matt Corral to play ahead of either of those 2?
I mean, that's the thing is, I think most people are probably similar to me, and they have very little to no faith in Sam Darnold's ability to hold down a starting position all year. So I think that's probably what's reflective in the ADP. I think the Baker Mayfield thing has just been so weird and strange and uncomfortable for everyone that nobody just knows what to do with him. And so that's why his ADP is what it is. But it wouldn't surprise me.
The rumors around Watson not playing might start pushing Baker up a little bit.
Exactly. I was going to say it wouldn't surprise me. The more I've thought about it, I've actually been sending out some offers for Baker Mayfield in dynasty leagues, because I feel like people are so freaked out and just done with him. But actually, he's nowhere near as bad as the kind of like narrative has become that he is. Like people are saying, they're putting him in the same category as a Sam Darnold or something like that. Whereas the truth is, when he's healthy and he's got a competent offense around him, he's shown to be a decent quarterback. So especially like a quarterback 2 in a dynasty superflex league or something. But for redraft, I think you get better options. But yeah, I actually really liked Matt Corral. Like as far as evaluating his tape and like looking at him for dynasty purposes, I really liked him, but I don't think, again, it's not something I'm going to be drafting in redraft. I'll keep an eye out. And if he does win the starting gig, like week 3, depending on my quarterback situation, or depending on like if I've won my first 3 weeks and I've sitting there with a couple bench spots, I might pick him up because he ran a lot in college. So he might have that really nice rushing floor, and he was really RPO heavy. If Christian McCaffrey is healthy, that could be a really nice little duo going on. But again, it's not something I'm drafting. I'm just going to keep an eye on and see how things shake out in Carolina.
Fair enough. Right. So to summarize that, rookie QBs in redraft this year, especially if it's one QB, forget it. Don't even bother is the summary of that one, right? Super. So let's move on to something that might be a little bit more relevant. First of all, Stacey joins us. Thanks, Stacey, for watching in.
Shout out, Stacey.
Running backs. 101 in most rookie drafts this year. Breece Hall, probably coming off the board as a top 10 running back in redraft this year. Hasn't touched an NFL football field. ADP at the minute sits kind of late 3rd round, early 4th round. Can we expect him to return that kind of value?
It wouldn't surprise me, but it could be dangerous. And I think for me, if I've waited till the 3rd or 4th round to try and get a running back, I'm probably not drafting Breece Hall because I want something that's kind of more of a sure thing. I think if I've decided to go really running back heavy and Breece Hall is like my 3rd running back in the 3rd or 4th round, then I'm probably happy enough with that because I think he has the potential. He has the talent. There's definitely going to be opportunity. I think he has that potential to become a top 10 back his rookie year. But at the same time, he comes from a tree and from a scheme that we've seen be really, sort of really running back, just hot hand approach. We saw Michael Carter do really well in spurts last year, somebody I really liked and I was really excited about. So, and there's also just
in the off season.
Yeah, I have a lot of Michael Carter. So, and honestly, I'm not just saying this. It could easily be a 60-40, 55-45 share, because from a real NFL perspective, that's good for them. They want a timeshare. They want lots of guys involved because then it keeps the chance of injury less, and it keeps the offense and the defense guessing what's going to happen here, who's on the field. They're both on the
Williams, field. Melvin Gordon kind of.
Exactly, yeah. And again, if we look at the fact that they've come from a tree of coaching where guys like, the 49ers, I mean, you never know. It's literally roulette every week. Is it a Jeff Wilson week? Is it a Trey Sermon week? Is it an Elijah Mitchell week?
It's never a Jeff Wilson week. He's never fit.
It was. Ask John Peterson and Tommy Pham. It was a Jeff Wilson week.
Yeah. There was one back there. But I mean, Breece Hall's, so you say you're taking the experience, guys. Breece Hall's ADP currently sits at 50. He is ahead of David Montgomery. He is ahead of J.K. Dobbins. He's ahead of Josh Jacobs, ahead of Antonio Gibson. Are you fading Hall in redraft this year in favor of those guys, perhaps?
Well, for example, where is he at versus Travis Etienne?
Etienne is going 6-7 spots ahead of him, 44, and Breece Hall's at 50, 6 spots on the ADP.
Yeah, so if I'm going to wait till like the 3rd round and I want to get a running back there, I'd rather have Etienne personally.
Cam Akers is sitting in the middle of them as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's other options that I'm probably more comfortable with. Like I said, it depends on your build. I think for me personally, depending on the league scoring, obviously, if it's PPR, tight end premium, things like that, if I've waited till the 3rd round, 4th round to get my first running back, I'd rather have somebody that, for me, Travis Etienne has an equally as high ceiling as a Breece Hall. And he has less competition, initially. And just looking at the Doug Peterson style offense, how they like to utilize their running backs, the fact that he's got that chemistry already with Trevor Lawrence, he doesn't need to build that chemistry. For me, I think I'd rather lean Travis Etienne probably in redraft over a Breece Hall because, like I said, we just don't know. We haven't seen it yet. And you can argue we haven't seen it yet with Etienne, but then there's some variables that you take out of the equation with Etienne that you can't take out of the equation with Breece Hall. So
if nothing else, I think you're sitting down reading the playbook.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, like you said, it just wouldn't surprise me to see Michael Carter involved more than we thought he was going to be involved. And ultimately, who knows? We get down into the red zone and all of a sudden, maybe they're just really hammering Elijah Moore and Garrett Wilson. And, those guys are the red zone guys. If they're not getting that goal line work, that really hurts their value as well. if Michael Carter is only a third down back and only getting targets, that still hurts Breece Hall because targets are incredibly value in fantasy. So,
so
it's a dangerous one.
Is listening, Murph's come back here and said if they split 60-40 in Hall's favour, are you worried there'll be enough volume for them to get up there? I think that's
that's it exactly. Right? That's the problem, is that we don't know how they're going to utilize them. So it's not going to. I'm not for a second thinking it's going to be an equal 50-50 or, that Michael Carter's going to get just as much work. I mean, they've obviously spent really intense draft capital. They went out of their way to get Breece Hall on the squad. So I'm sure he's going to get the lion's share, but at the same time, it just it matters. How does that lion's share break down? I think that's the real question is, does Michael Carter get the third down pass catching role? That really hurts Breece Hall's value unless he's getting all the red zone work. But even if he gets the red zone work, how efficient is the offense to get them red zone work? It's all a lot of questions because we still need to see Zach Wilson take that step forward, which we didn't see last year. So I think he's a risky bet. I feel like in Dynasty, I'm more than happy to take that bet because I think the skill is there, the talent is there. But I think for me, it is a risky one. It's one of those ones where I think your team is either going to smash or could potentially really hurt your team if you go Breece Hall, because he could either just be like that mid running back 2, which why would you take a mid running back 2 in the third round or second round? Or he's just going to be like this amazing from day one, incredible, get 90% of the work and just be an absolute stud.
Fine. So moving on from Breece Hall then, the next running back we come to in the rookies and the ADP is Kenneth Walker. Now, where he's in relation to his teammates actually surprised me. Kenneth Walker's going off the board at 88. He is nearly 3 rounds ahead of Rashaad Penny, who many believe will be the lead back in Seattle this year with Carson's injury. Carson's way down on that ADP currently. Can you see Walker being that big a role to pick him up at that stage?
I could. So I would see that. Yeah, personally. I mean, honestly, I know there's some hardcore Rashaad Penny truthers out there, but unfortunately, we've just never seen him be able to stay healthy, ever since he's been there. I mean, he got supplanted by Chris Carson, who was the lesser drafted running back. He got supplanted.
Troubles himself.
Yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, it's one of those situations where I think people are sort of banking on the health. And it's not like Penny's been signed to this big multi-year extension. Yeah. I think it's sort of a situation where they've gone out and they've made it a priority to get Kenneth Walker on the team. We know Pete Carroll's history of run the dang ball. That's probably part of the reason why Russell Wilson's not in town anymore is because Pete Carroll wants to establish the run. He wants to run the ball. They've got a better offensive line. They have a weird quarterback controversy going on where we don't know who's going to be the starter. And even whoever it does end up being the starter probably isn't an elite option. So they're going to need a good solid run game. And honestly, if you look at Chris Carson, whenever he has been healthy, he was always a low end RB1, high end RB2. And honestly, Kenneth Walker is an incredibly talented running back. I mean, in my opinion, and the thing is as well, I know a lot has been made about him not catching the ball a lot and that being a concern for fantasy. But again, if you look back to the model of Chris Carson, he never was this elite pass catcher. No. I don't think he ever got more than 50 targets in a season, and that's not normally what you see from RB1s and stuff like that. So to me, even if he's only getting 30 or 40 targets, he's getting lion's share of the work and stuff like that. I think he's talented enough and he's very, very fast. People forget how speedy and stuff. He's able to break those long runs with the improved offensive line, with the fact that he's one of those few running backs and in one of those few situations where you could actually see him get 20 touches a game. I wouldn't surprise me if he takes over that Pete Carroll gives him 20, 25 touches a game. And so for me, I think, I'd rather wait those extra few rounds and get Kenneth Walker than probably take Breece Hall at cost, just based on then you can stack 3-4 wide receivers, a tight end, and then come in and grab Kenneth Walker and sort of piecemeal it together.
I think Kenneth Walker for me, we'll go through the rest of the show, but I think Kenneth Walker for me is probably the safest rookie to draft this year because of the situation he's got. You look at his ADP around him, running back wise, Tony Pollard just behind him. You've got Corral, Patterson, Damian Harris. So these guys you'll be picking up as your RB3, your flex spot, maybe something like that. And I think Kenneth Walker's upside is higher than that, even if it won't be out the gate and it isn't guaranteed. I think his upside's far higher than an RB3 flex spot play.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, talent wise and even situation wise, and I'm not saying this will happen or I'm even projecting this to happen, but I would not be shocked if he was like RB11 at the end of the year. Like I
Well,
wouldn't
if they
be
all get
shocked.
injured like last year, easy.
Yeah. If he gets the volume, if he locks down the Seattle backfield and he's getting that volume, he's talented enough, in my opinion. He could be a low end RB1 just based on volume.
Super. Murph's here interviewing from the train. Can we see a scenario where
Shout out,
Walker is
Murph.
held back in the opening weeks so he can get time to adjust and not burn the tyres off him in a dead year? Which I guess there is that feasibility, but I guess if they use Penny early, heavy, Penny's not making it to mid-season without an injury. Right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think that, I would feel very, very surprised, even at the start of the year, if it's not at least a 50-50 timeshare. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just would be very surprised by that.
And that's probably even to try and keep the workload off of Penny and try and make him last through the season.
Yeah,
as well,
exactly.
So,
yeah, even if they want Penny to do well, it would surprise me if he's not getting at least 50% of the work.
Fair. And one other running back I want to cover off is James Cook. Went to Buffalo in the draft. They had a kind of Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, really kind of split look coming into last season. Singletary come out and won the role and proved himself to be the lead back there in Buffalo. James Cook's come into town. And Singletary and Cook have almost an identical ADP. So we're using Underdog's ADP as of last week, currently, 1 QB league. Singletary at 107.1 and Cook's at 107.9. Do you see this being that even a split? Because it's not for me.
Well, I am a certified James Cook truther. So for me personally, yes, I do. I would see it as, because a couple of things just quickly. I'll try and keep this to 3 hours minimum. But the thing is about James Cook is that he never had a bell cow role. He doesn't need a bell cow role to succeed. So he's not going to have the bell cow role. I don't expect Singletary to disappear. So absolutely, Singletary could be a value and he could be a really great option for you. But if I'm looking at that range in the draft, I'm probably looking just for upside. I want the upside play. And to me, James Cook is the upside. Even if nothing changes about the Buffalo offense, they still had about 80 targets off the top of my head that went to the running back position last year. My assumption would be 90% of those targets, or at least 60-70% of those targets, go to Cook. Cook is an incredibly efficient pass catching back. He's very fast, makes him a deadly weapon, even if he's only getting the third down work. Singletary last year was incredibly inefficient as a pass catching back, very inefficient. I think he averaged like 5 yards per reception, something around that, according to PFF grades and things like that. Just very inefficient back. He might get the main running work, and then even Cook just gets the pass catching work. But again, historically speaking, last year, I think if he got even 60 targets, which I would assume he gets at least that, I think the worst running back last year to get 60 targets was Myles Gaskin at RB 24, 25. So I think your kind of low end floor, in my opinion, for Cook is like a low end RB2, barring any injury. Whereas I think,
which if you're drafting at 107, you're okay with that, right?
Yeah, exactly. If I'm getting an RB2, I'm getting an RB2 that I can get in the 10th round or something like that, then I'm absolutely happy with that. I just don't think there's as much upside for Singletary. I think that he had a really nice streak there at the end of the year last year when they decided that Moss was dead and buried and they had nobody else to rely on. But, the reality is they drafted James Cook, third running back taken in the draft. Really high draft capital, higher than Moss, higher than Singletary. There's a reason for that. They didn't draft him just to play special teams or just to sit on the bench. So,
So this, for me, with them being so local, comes down. I want to say cautious drafter, perhaps. It comes down to safety net or upside. And if you're sat there on the board and these two are sitting there side by side at that spot, I guess you're going to learn a lot about your league mates here as to where they're at. I mean, myself, posed with that question, at the minute, I'm taking Singletary. I think he's got the role. He had the role last year. He beat Zach Moss out to it. He looked comfortable. He's got a nice, steady floor each week. I'm okay with that as and when needed. As you say, Cook does have some upside, and if he can get the catching work and he can potentially steal some of Singletary's role, he could have a big influence. But for me, I think at the minute, especially this year in redraft, I'm looking at Buffalo being a heavily fancied contending team and going with what they know in Singletary as opposed to the wild card in Cook. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, totally. And I think, like you said, it depends on people's draft strategies, what they like. For
Yeah,
me in redraft, the later in the draft I get, the more I'm just shooting for upside. Like I
yeah,
want to be safe with my first 3 or 4 picks. I want to know what I'm getting myself into. And that's why I'm a little bit nervous about Breece Hall, because I'm like, yeah, I see the
yeah,
talent, but, and that's why I didn't have a lot of Javonte Williams last year in redraft.
yeah,
I love Javonte Williams. He was my favorite running back last year. I didn't have a lot of them because I was like, I don't know, man, it's going to be a timeshare. I'm not sure what
yeah.
to expect. It could take a bit of time. So those first couple rounds, man, I want my Devontae Adams, I want my Keenan Allens, I want my guys that I know what I'm getting. But the later I get in drafts, like I don't want somebody who I'm like, hey, if everything falls just right, he could be like a mid RB3. It's like, no, I want somebody who, if everything falls just right, what if this guy's the RB14 because he gets 96 targets? You know what I mean? That's what I'm
Fair
looking
enough.
for when I get late into the 10th, 12th rounds.
Fair. So I think that's pretty much all we're going to see fantasy relevance from this year at running back in terms of rookies and redrafts. So wide receivers moving on. We had a few go first round in the NFL draft. We've had a look at ADP again. London and Burks are within a round of each other on their ADP currently. So we've got Drake London coming out at 67 and Traylon Burks at 74. So sort of 7 spots apart. Any of them viable? Any fancy one over the other? I mean, other players within that catchment, Hunter Renfro, Brandon Ayuk, Russell Gage, all returning a similar ADP. Are you taking a gamble on the upside as you said you would do on these guys
Yeah.
here?
I'm taking Drake London 10 out of 10 times there, personally.
Okay.
Like in my pre-draft evaluations, I had Drake London as my wide receiver 2, just like half a point behind Garrett Wilson. So
Right.
he was really pretty much neck and neck for me evaluating them. And with their landing spots and their draft capital, I've actually bumped Drake London into my wide receiver 1 spot for this draft class. Traylon
Okay.
Burks was about wide receiver 5 for me. 4 or 5. Like I'm just not as high on him as some people. I see a lot of things that I'm concerned about. Now, saying that, I love his landing spot. I think he went to the one place where I was sort of like, man, if he could go somewhere, and I use that as an example pre-draft, I was like, if he could go somewhere like the Titans where they know how to use a guy like that, that would be great. So I love that for him, but I still have concerns about him. And Drake London, I mean, is in at least as good a spot, in my opinion, if not a better spot, because there aren't any real solid veterans on the team who are going to steal targets away from him. He's going to get 140, 150 targets this year. There's no way around that. To your point earlier, the Falcons are most likely going to suck. And they're going to have to throw the ball like crazy. And they've literally got Pitts, London, Brian Edwards, who's never done anything in the NFL, much to my heartbreak, and Cordero Patterson, who I love, but he's not going to steal 160 targets or 200 targets or anything. So, man, you give him Drake London, and Drake London, his skill set, he's a contested catch meister. He's also, just a big dude, big target. So it doesn't even matter how accurate for me the quarterback is, because he had some terrible quarterback play last year. And again, if you go back to the Titans, they've got Derrick Henry. They want to run the ball. They're a good team. They could potentially, with all their injuries that they've got in the rearview mirror, if they stay healthy, they could just try and run the ball like crazy, and then spread it out to Robert Woods, who's still there. Not still there, but he's still a player. He's there. He's a quality veteran who could easily be the wide receiver 1 on that team this year. They've got Kyle Phillips, who I really like, who could be stealing some of the slot work. They've got Chigoziem Okonkwo, who is more of a longer shot, but they've got some tight ends there. So for me, it'd be an easy Drake London personally.
Okay. Anyone that listens to the show week in, week out knows me and Murph probably picking up Russell Gage in that slot. But I think of the two, Drake London, for all the reasons you've said, it just sticks out as one of the most viable options around that thing. Renfro, Ayuk, you know what you're going to get. London, I think, equals them on a bad year.
And I think that Russell Gage should be great for the first few weeks of the season, probably, because Tom Brady's awesome. That's a great offense to be part of. But again, is he just a placeholder? And when you need that production later in the season, is Godwin going to be the dude again? So for me, it's like, hey, in redraft, you've only got this year. You need to win this year. And so for me, Drake London is, in theory, hopefully just going to be getting better and better as the season goes on. His target share shouldn't be getting lesser. His role's not going to be replaceable. So for me, I would be certainly, especially because at that stage in the draft, I would be hopeful that London is like my 3rd, maybe 4th wide receiver at that stage. And I genuinely think it's a very realistic outcome that he's a top 24, top 30 wide receiver this year. So again, I think he's returning value for me at that stage.
Super. Next guy up on the ADP is Skye Moore, around about round 7. He's going before guys Tyler Lockett, Kadarius Toney, and his new teammate in Marcus Valdez-Scantling. Now, this guy's seen, since the rookie draft, kind of a, not quite meteoric or astronomical, but it's getting up there, rise in his ADP, purely based on his landing spot in Kansas City, I believe. Skye Moore over MVS, same team, same QB, same situation. I don't like that one, personally.
Yeah, for me, it's Skye Moore there over
Okay.
MVS because we've seen multiple years of MVS and we know who he is, I feel like.
Yeah.
Now, I could be wrong. You know, he could come out and just absolutely ball out. But realistically, how big of a difference skill-wise is there between Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers? Not that big a difference, you know? And ultimately, yes, Tyreek Hill's gone, but Travis Kelce's still wide receiver 1 in Kansas City. So it's very similar in the sense if you want to talk about, well, you know, he wasn't the number 1 target. Well, he's not going to be the number 1 target in Kansas City. He's probably not even the 2 or the 3 necessarily. So I would rather, if I was going to, now again, I don't know that I will because it's redraft. And again, it depends on how I've built my roster. If we're looking into, if I've got 3, like if I've got Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, and, you know, Mike Williams as my starting wide receivers, and I'm looking for upside, I'll take Skye Moore because I really liked Skye Moore pre-draft. He has a great production profile. He's somebody that you don't see guys from that small of a school being early declares very often. It is a fantastic landing spot. He does a lot of things really well. So if I'm shooting for upside, I would like to see what Skye Moore can do for me. But again, I would say he's maybe a little bit more of a risky bet. He's somebody that, you know, could completely just bust for you, or he could be amazing and just like smash, and you're like, hey, you're locking him into your lineup every single week because they're finding ways to get him involved with gadget plays and things like that.
Okay. For me, it's risky. Juju's there, MVS, as we say. Travis Kelce is ultimately the wide receiver 1 on the sideline. There's much doubt about that. And I just think all of that kind of limits Skye Moore's capacity almost in some way. And we said about MVS, yeah, I probably would take Skye Moore over MVS because the known floor is quite low with MVS, whereas I think the upside of Skye Moore could be higher.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think
his ADP is right next to Kenneth Walker. I'll take Kenneth Walker instead.
Yeah, I'll take Kenneth Walker instead.
Later.
Exactly, especially the way I build teams. I'll probably be taking Kenneth Walker as like my RB1 because I'll already have like 4 wide receivers, a tight end, and maybe even my quarterback. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I need some running backs now. And I'll grab Kenneth Walker. So yeah, 100%. But if you've built your team in a different way and you're looking for upside at that stage, I would certainly take Skye Moore over MVS or Mecole Hardman or anybody like that.
Super. Next to, again, pretty similar. Mid-8th round, we're coming into Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson at the Jets. Now, I've compared these guys to, I guess, what is effectively the wide receiver 1 of their team. So, in Olave's instance, Michael Thomas is over a round ahead of him. And Elijah Moore is nearly 3 rounds ahead of Garrett Wilson. But I'd say from the outside looking in, there's an option that both of these guys could almost make their way into wide receiver 1 on their current rosters.
It's certainly possible, 100% possible. I think it's more probable that Olave does because I've got real concerns about Michael Thomas. Like, it's been so long since we've seen him on the field. And even now, still like what I would expect to be hearing right now is that, man, he looks good. Man, he can't wait to get out there. And instead we're hearing like, well, there's a chance that he'll be ready by training camp. I don't like that at all. So for me, Olave, I had him as, I believe, wide receiver 4 in this class. I really liked him a lot. So I had high hopes for him anyways. He gets that first round draft capital. Jameis Winston loves to sling the ball. Olave is probably the best route runner of the class as far as being polished and ready to go in the NFL.
Outside receiver as well, right? And if they put Landry in, who can play that slot role,
exactly.
Olave's got that role to himself.
Yeah, the defense can't just focus on Olave because they have brought in, Juice, and they've also still got a really good run game. They've beefed up their offensive line again. So it wouldn't surprise me if Olave has well over 100 targets this year as a rookie. So again, I would be leaning Olave because I feel like there's very limited circumstances which he busts this year. I'd be very surprised if he's a complete just bust.
Fair. And how about the Jets there then with the Wilson and Moore? Now, I personally got their production in the year being really similar, almost like we spoke about with Breece Hall and Michael Carter, and you don't really know this known entity of how this offense is going to quite pan out. In my head, I've got Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore returning pretty similar figures in my projection. So a 3-round swing. Me and Murph spoke before in drafts. I always take the second guy in an unknown offense. Lockett and Metcalf take the second one. Evans and Godwin take the second one.
Yeah.
And I'm here. I'll take Wilson 3 rounds after Moore and hope they return the same numbers.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly fair. I mean, I think I would say, in redraft, sadly, I probably won't have a lot of either of them, just because, like you said, I mean,
It's
first,
an unknown quantity there.
yeah, for this to work, we need Zach Wilson to make a fairly sizable step forward. Let's be honest, he did not have a good rookie season. He didn't look great. I think he will take a step forward. I don't know how much of a step forward. And the problem is like, if he takes that step forward, is he going to take that step forward focusing on Elijah Moore or focusing on Garrett Wilson or focusing on Corey Davis or focusing on the tight ends? Like, we don't know how this shakes out. So like you said, with redraft, it's so different in Dynasty. And I played like a lot of Dynasty. So in Dynasty, I'm like, yeah, I love Elijah Moore. I love Garrett Wilson because I trust the talent to eventually win out. But man, in redraft, when you need that, you need wins game week 1, game week 2, game week 3. I'm probably looking at other options in and around those ADPs.
So let's find the ADPs. I haven't got it to hand. The sheets decided to crash and break on me, obviously, because that's what happens when you do it live. But Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, 2 apart. What wide receivers he got in a bit? Chase Claypool, don't know that. Robert Woods, I do like. 5 places behind Wilson. Who else we got? Michael Gallup, if he can get healthy. Tyler Boyd. I quite like Tyler Boyd instead there. Again, like
I mean, if
redraft, I'm not touching a lot of the Jets.
Around their ADPs, yeah, I think that, it depends on what you've done so far in your build, what you're looking for. I mean, I would be, if I hadn't already got a tight end, I'd rather have Dallas Goedert as my tight end around that range than to, grab Garrett Wilson as my, probably wide receiver 4 or 5. If you can lock in Dallas Goedert as your tight end there, or, even if you've gone pretty light on running back, we've already touched on a couple of the other guys, but Kareem Hunt, I would love Kareem Hunt there. I am a big Kareem Hunt fan this year. I think he's going to be great. I think people really underestimate and undervalue how good he is. Even around that area, Zach Ertz, I mean, he was like tight end 4 or 5, so I think there's a lot of safer bets in that area for ADP. If you haven't got your tight end yet, grab Zach Ertz, grab Dallas Goedert. You probably just grabbed yourself a top 5, top 6 tight end rather than grabbing like a we don't know what, with Garrett Wilson. He's a great guy, great talented wide receiver, my wide receiver 1 pre-draft, but it's just so much unknown.
Fair. And the last wide receiver I want to touch upon, mainly because Rich, Dynasty Island from 5 Yard Dynasty, for those of you that don't know him, has asked me to. Christian Watson at Green Bay. ADP's returning around about round 10. Now, from the outside looking in, there's a realistic opportunity this guy could be the wide receiver in Green Bay. If you can pick him up in round 10, that could be a steal, right?
Yeah, 100%. I love
upside and picking a punt late and picking up your 4th or 5th wide receiver and going, hey, I don't want to say floor, I want upside. Is there a bigger upside than Christian Watson in round 10 currently?
No, 100%, man. And that's what I said. That's what I was saying earlier is, for me, the later in redraft that I get, the later rounds, like, I just want upside. I want I want the lottery ticket, because that's how you're going to win. So Christian Watson, 100%. I mean, if you look around, like, who's going around him, I'm way rather in taking a chance on him than Tyler Boyd. I'd way rather take a chance on him than an injured Michael Gallup. I'd way rather take a chance.
The people around him, as you say, you've got Rondale Moore, you've got Kenny Golladay, you've got Tyler Boyd to say. Christian Watson in Green Bay, his floor's got to be equal to them. His floor has to be equal to them. But his ceiling is so much higher than them.
Talent-wise, Jameson Williams is beyond him, but with that injury, there's no way I'm drafting him in redraft ahead of, a Christian Watson. If it's Dynasty, that's different. But in redraft, 100%. Like you said, Tim Patrick, he's a great receiver, but he's probably the 3rd or 4th receiver on his team. Mecole Hardman, we know who Mecole Hardman is. Jamison Crowder, again, what is he, wide receiver 3 or 4 on his team? There's just, I think Christian Watson is an absolute value there in the 10th round, really. If you think about what he could become, what he could be, it's hard to imagine any of these other players, maybe Jacoby Myers, but other than that, it's hard to imagine really any of these other players being much more of a value than Watson there.
Fine. Last position to touch upon, tight end. I've pretty much put most in redraft leagues this year are going to become undrafted. Can you see any of them becoming viable options in a redraft league this year?
The only two that I can imagine being viable potentially, I mean, tight end is just notorious for taking time. It's even some of the best, even Kyle Pitts, who's like this generational talent. He ended up pretty good, but it wasn't like you were jumping over the moon, so excited to lock him into your lineup last year. A lot of times, a lot of that's one touchdown. That's fair enough. But I would say, keep an eye on Jelani Woods because there's a fairly thin receiving core outside of Michael Pittman. We know that Frank Reich likes to utilize tight ends. We know that Matt Ryan has utilized tight ends historically in his career. Mo Alley Cox is there, but he's never been like this beast target share monster. Again, it's not somebody I would draft. It's just somebody I would keep an eye on and see what happens.
Yeah.
I wouldn't surprise me if Jelani Woods became viable later in the season. He was a monster last year, receiving wise. And, you never know with Trey McBride. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to be viable because of Ertz being there, but you never know because maybe all of a sudden they're going to be running more 2 tight end sets, because that could be a thing. So I would keep an eye on him, but I wouldn't be drafting either of them.
Fair. So I wrote here values and gambles. So which rookies do you feel present really good value for this year's upcoming redraft as it stands? Who you're happy to pick? Who you're okay to take a pick on and gamble on, like we said with Watson perhaps? So who are you looking to pick up in your redrafts this year?
I mean, honestly, like we talked about, Christian Watson seems like a great value that late in the draft because, a lot of times you have to like pay up to take the risk and, it can be a bit scary, but honestly, I think I would say, honestly, I feel like Drake London is a good value. I mean, because you're getting him in the 6th or 7th round.
Yeah.
It's not like you're paying top 3, top 4 round, prices for him.
Wide receiver 1 there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what I mean is that, you're getting a probably a team's wide receiver 1, and you're locking somebody into 140, 150 targets. That's pretty good in the 6th round or something, especially if you went like running back heavy and you're looking for upside with your wide receivers. I think that, as far as running backs, there are a couple of rookie running backs, you could get really late in your rookie drafts just to take a punt on to see what happens those first couple of weeks. For example, Dameon Pierce with the Texans. He is, he was really misutilized and underutilized there in Florida, but he is a really talented running back. He's got a really solid build. We just don't know. We didn't really see anything from Marlon Mack when he came back from that injury. And Rex Burkhead is Rex Burkhead. He's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. But I would pick up Dameon Pierce maybe really late in the draft and just see how those first couple of weeks are looking, as well as that. Tyler Algier is another one because Atlanta has so few weapons and they really only have Cordero Patterson. And, they don't, from my understanding, they don't really want to primarily utilize him as a running back. They want to be able to move him around like a chess piece almost, get him involved in the receiving game and things like that. So there's a chance that Tyler Algier, has more work than we expect. And again, he's probably basically free in your redraft leagues. You can get him with like your last pick of the draft. Probably those are some of the main ones that I would say, to actually potentially punt on sort of like at the end, because especially with running backs, man, if you hit on that James Robinson or something, that is gold in redraft because you're just going to be, you're going to be set up.
You start as early and you've got a bonus starter for little cost.
Yeah, exactly. Or even, exactly. So I think those are a couple of running backs that you could certainly look to take a little shot on. And then even as far as like, I would say those are the main ones, really, the main real values that seem to stand out. Christian Watson, keep an eye on training camp news. I've heard some real positive things about Romeo Doubs coming out of camp about they're really liking his hands. He seems to be catching everything and all that sort of stuff. And he was sort of a deep threat in Nevada, but he's a longer shot. He's just somebody I would pay attention to in preseason, see what's happening. I think those camp reports, the preseason reports, they can be really useful, especially in redraft for picking out those. One other one actually that did come to mind, Abram Smith. He was a UDFA. He signed with the Saints. And the thing is, Kamara's a stud, but he is getting older and there's nothing really behind him. And historically, we've seen a really nice tandem there. Usually for the last several years, Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara would always be this great 1-2 punch. Somebody that I actually really liked, Abram Smith. I was surprised he went undrafted. He had a really great year there in Baylor. He put up some really good numbers running in this outside zone scheme. I think that if any like UDFA or late round guy is going to hit, it probably is either him or Kennedy Brooks. And Kennedy Brooks has a lot more competition in Philadelphia than Abram Smith has in New
Kamara
Orleans.
does get a suspension, he's straight into an RB2 role behind
Exactly.
Ingram, easy. And that's what you're looking for in that repeat. You're looking for who has the shortest path to snaps, meaningful snaps.
And that's the thing with Abram Smith, I would 100% recommend most people, especially if they're just casual redraft players and they've not really been paying attention in the offseason, they're not going to draft Abram Smith. They're probably not even going to know who he is. So if you get to your last round in the draft and you've got all your other things, just as a dart throw, I would pick him up because
there's a chance that round comes by.
There's a chance that even if Alvin Kamara doesn't get suspended, and even if Alvin Kamara is playing, that he still gets work because they want Alvin Kamara to stay healthy. They've shown with their draft strategy, with the way they've utilized their picks, that they're not playing for next year, playing for 3 years down the line. They're actually going for it. They're trying to compete this year. So they're going to want Kamara to stay healthy. They're going to want to spread the ball around a little bit. And if Abram Smith is showing well in training camp and preseason, he could be an absolute steal in redraft.
Awesome. So Evan, thanks for joining us. Just before we go, tell people where they can find you. Where's your Twitter? What the articles? Give us a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at FFEvanlution, like it says there. Revolution, but my name, Evanlution. It's a whole thing. You can catch the show Dynasty Debates on all the podcast listening platforms, putting up new shows every week. Usually, honestly, most weeks probably 2 shows, sometimes more. And that's every single week. Lots of really great guests there. So check that out. And then I do ranking, Superflex tight end premium ranking over at Dynasty Nerds. So if you have a subscription, it's really cheap and they have a lot of great tools. They've got Dynasty GM where you can literally look at all your teams across various platforms and trades and all that kind of stuff. And I do some articles. I've just released an article last week. It's kind of looking at PFF grades and how they actually correlate for fantasy football. So, does a top 12 PFF quarterback mean a top 12 fantasy quarterback? So I've already done the quarterback position. I'll be looking at running backs and wide receivers, things like that. So yeah, you can catch articles and rankings over at Dynasty Nerds. Catch me on Twitter or listen to the podcast Dynasty Debates.
I'm going to use somewhere else. If you love what Evan has to say, Evan is, I think it's been announced yet, and I'm not breaking this, but Evan is one of our guest panel speakers at the UK Fantasy Football Collective event next month in July here in London. We are almost at single-digit tickets left. So if anyone's debating whether to come, wants to come, not quite sure, the opportunity is nearly going to elude you. It's about time to look into those train journeys and hotels, if that be the case, and grab your tickets because they will be gone, I feel. So for anybody that's listening that has missed Murph, Murph is actually on Carl Yates' Playbook podcast this week. That's Thursday at about 3 p.m., I think, hard time. We're going out live, so we can catch him there and then. Also, the 5-yard FFCC. There was a huge man out last week. Most of the invites are out now, so if you've got it, please go get your donations in. It's all for a fantastic cause, as always. What else have we got to mention? Murph's Fantasy Football Playbook should be out next week. We're dependent on Amazon, but it's off to them now, so hopefully that'll be live and up and running and out next week for you. And just going back to the FFCC, there are just a small handful of places left. So if anyone's not in it yet, feels they're missing out, head over to the 5-Yard Rush website, get your name registered, get signed up, and hopefully that invite will be on its way to you. Evan, anything else you'd like to add before we bid you goodbye, sir?
Oh, no, man. Just shout out Murph. Thanks for missing the show so I can come on. And thanks very much for having me on, Dan. You're a great host, and it's been an absolute pleasure being on here. So thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
No, you're welcome. So insightful. I listen to your Dynasty Debate show quite often, and it is insightful, and I enjoy what you have to say. So pleasure to have you on and meet you, and I look forward to meeting you next month in person as well. So guys, Big Man isn't here. I'm going to have to use his catchphrase, unfortunately, but everybody out there, please, we'll see you next week. But in the meantime, keep brushing.